100 times the typical dose. And I did that because I read on a forum somewhere that the reason why I put it in orange juice is because I read on a forum somewhere that putting in orange juice allows you to drink even more without causing terrible side effects. So that's just how I did it. For whatever reason, that's what I decided to go with. Now, I should mention that I had taken fairly large doses of iodine several times before, like as much as 50 milligrams and 75 milligrams. So I was already pretty sure that I wasn't allergic to it and tolerated it somewhat well. I would never take a dose like 1,000 milligrams without first thoroughly testing smaller doses around 2 milligrams, then 10 milligrams, then 20, kind of working my way up. So the main thing I noticed while taking the 1,000 milligrams is that I was constipated, which what I believe is it probably indicates that it was killing off all the bacteria in my gut, since bacteria is needed for proper bowel movements. But that's just my guess. So I drank that concoction for 7 days. Then after the seventh day, I waited around 15 days, and on the 15th day, I did the fecal transplant, and it was from a healthy female again. The only reason why I waited 15 days is because I couldn't do it any sooner. If I had my pick, I would have done it like 2 days after I completed the iodine, maybe 2 to 5 days. Maybe it helped me to wait the 15 days. I don't know. That's just how it kind of worked out, and I'm just telling you exactly what I did. Also, I ate zero sugar and ate hardly any carbohydrates other than the orange juice during that entire process up until I did the transplant. And then after I did the transplant, I resumed a normal diet. And I did that because sugar feeds bad bacteria and fungus. So if I killed off anything with the iodine, I didn't want it growing back before the transplant had time to take. I hope that makes sense. So I did the transplant, and after the transplant, I didn't notice any difference. I didn't feel amazing like I did that first time. Nothing really changed until about the seventh day, where I had a little bit of extra energy. But it was really subtle. I actually thought it hadn't worked and nothing had changed still at that point. But then after around, all of this is just kind of rough estimate from memory. But after around 20 days or so, I noticed I had increased appetite and felt all around a little better. The thing is this had happened before, so I didn't really think it was the transplant. I just thought I was on a high and I'm soon going to crash again. That happens a lot with PFS. You feel great, you think, oh wow, something amazing is happening. I'm getting better, and then you crash. So that's what I thought was happening at that point. But then I started noticing after my workouts, I didn't feel as wiped out. But the big sign for me that something was really different was when I had my first really sugary dessert. Okay, so 100% of the time when I ate a lot of sugar, I would feel horrible in the coming days. It wasn't immediately after. I would feel fine after I ate it, maybe for the next day or so. And then in the coming days, I would feel like completely crashed. But now, this time, after eating, I actually felt energy and a sugar high like I always had when I had sugar before I got PFS. So it was basically just a lot of sugar and I had no crash, and that never happened to me. And I didn't want to get too cocky, so I backed off the sugar and just stuck with a healthy diet at that point and started noticing that the past several months had been awesome and that my brain fog had pretty much completely left. I think I was so used to having temporary recoveries followed by a crash that I just kind of expected to crash again. And I expected to crash again for like an entire year and a half. I just kept thinking, oh, I'm going to crash. This is not a cure, because that's just what I had come to believe. That was my reality for year after year after year. That's how much doubt PFS had put in me. But I still hadn't crashed, and at that point I knew something must be different, because this is the longest I'd ever gone without not crashing. So I decided to run another stool test. This time the stool test came back with completely normal beneficial bacteria. And this is like well over a year and a half after the transplant. And that's when I was feeling really confident that I had found something. So here's what that test looks like after. This is after I did the iodine and the transplant. Now, somewhere around here, the post-finasteride studies, they came out with a paper that proved that people with post-finasteride syndrome have what they called altered microbiomes. And of course, I like to believe that my post, my Game Over PFS post, where I talked about my very first fecal transplant, I like to believe that that played a little part in them even looking at that, but maybe that's just me being egotistical. It didn't really matter at that point because I was feeling better from what I had done. So even after I had the stool test and feeling better for well over a year, I still wasn't confident that the results would stick. Again, I was just trained to believe that it wouldn't. So I decided to really put it to the test. I just at that point decided to really test it. I was going to eat tons of sugar because a truly recovered person should be able to do that. Eat as much sugar as they want. And I also loved the idea of, obviously eating tons of crappy food that I had avoided for 10 years because I was avoiding all this sugary food because I knew how bad it would make me feel. So this is like a fun way to test and see if it worked. So for the next literally like half a year or a year, I pretty much binged on whatever I wanted. I'd have a dessert anytime I went out. I would drink alcohol whenever I wanted, basically have a crap diet like most of my friends do, and like I used to have before PFS. And I kept thinking, eventually I'm going to crash, eventually I'm going to crash, but I never did. And that's pretty much what's led to this video. It's been well over 2 years, possibly 3, since I did the iodine and transplant, and I can still say that I've not crashed. Basically, I behave like a totally normal person and feel fine. I can work out, no anhedonia, no brain fog, normal sex life. Now, I have to say, because what I did is so extreme, I would never actually recommend this treatment to anybody because I think it can actually be dangerous. But people are allowed to make their own decisions, so I want to share my experience. Of course, I'm going to tell you what fixed me because that's what I would want somebody to do for me. So that's why I'm here. Taking that much iodine could theoretically damage your liver or kidneys. But I should mention, there's some forum boards, they have talked about doing this multiple times without any ill effect. And I've had my liver and kidneys tested multiple times since then, and they show no problem. So I have no elevated liver enzymes. I have no problems with my EGFR, which is it's a basic test of kidney function. So it did not negatively impact me as far as I know. As for the fecal transplant, you could possibly even get an STD or other issues and diseases. So you really have to be careful when you choose your donor. Just make sure you choose it wisely if you decide to go that route. Also, before considering doing this, I would definitely get a stool test done because if you have your beneficial bacteria and bad bacteria are fine, in other words, you have plenty of beneficial bacteria, but you don't have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, then I don't really see any reason to do this at all. If you get tested and you show no beneficial bacteria like I did, which I suspect that most PFSers will, not have that beneficial bacteria. In my opinion, that is a major problem, and you should probably work with a physician to correct that issue. Something to note about this stool test is don't take any probiotics at all for at least a month before you do the stool test because it could give you skewed results. The stool test could show that you have some beneficial bacteria, but that's actually the probiotics, and it's the probiotics that don't stick. They kind of hang out in there for a little while. They're called transient, and then you poo them out and they're just gone. Whereas a fecal transplant, there's something about it, they'll actually stay. I'll leave a link below to the stool test that you can use. I have zero affiliation with them. It's just the same ones that I used. I think it's also important to consider that maybe it was just the high dose of iodine that killed something off in me, and then it allowed my good bacteria to proliferate. So maybe I didn't even need the fecal transplant at all. I have no idea. I have read stories of people using high doses of iodine with permanently good effects. So again, talk to a physician and see if it's right for you. And of course, if you have liver or kidney issues or an allergic reaction to iodine, then maybe none of this is going to work for you anyways. I'll close this out by saying over the past 10 plus years, I've dedicated literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on supplements, tests, experiments, hundreds of $1,000s that honestly I didn't have. Reading and researching, trying to find a way out of this mess called post-Finasteride syndrome. At this point in my life, I'm in recovery mode where I'm trying to make up for losing 10 or 20 years of my life, depending on how you look at it. For that reason, I have no problems dropping a link to my PayPal and Venmo for a donation. I'll probably just my PayPal for a donation if you appreciate the time and efforts I've put in. Nobody should feel obligated to give me any money. The information I've left here is absolutely free. I've left nothing out. The link is only there if you feel inclined to give me something back. If you don't, do not feel bad. If you have post-Finasteride syndrome, you have suffered and you owe nobody anything. And my heart goes out to you, truly, genuinely. This has been a really long video, much longer than I wanted it to be, but I wanted to make sure I get everything in here. I may create some future videos where maybe I'll do a quick rundown of things I found helped my symptoms when I did have PFS. One of which is vitamin D3, which although I found helps in the beginning, I think it harms in the long run. I do not think vitamin D3 is good for post-Finasteride syndrome, but maybe I'll try and make some videos about that later on. So if you want to see that, then of course you can subscribe and turn on notifications for that. In any case, I hope this was helpful to somebody out there, anyone out there, and I wish you all the best.